more as author to more as a figure, a character in various kinds of literatures and literature and plays. So we have about 20 minutes for questions and discussion. So we'd like to show the first question. Yes?
I have a question. Thank you for this. This is interesting. I have a question about the character of Fortune or Fortuna in Wages, The Longer You Live, because the line that you gave, I've read many worlds of this, I've never seen, is a very close paraphrase of more the character at the end of Utopia after hearing Hythlodae's comment. So I'm wondering whether the lines by Fortuna, and you said that this is that Fortune and Morris are the same actor. I'm wondering whether the lines spoken by Fortune in this play are in fact lifted from Morris' work, whether it becomes a parody of Morris' writing in that sense.
Well, this only makes my argument stronger, I think, because it becomes more close to the historical character who's indirectly depicted. So it's not exactly. It's not more, but it's Morris, but it seems to be more because of the names and the events and now the paraphrase that they're satirizing Utopia here. And it's curious because Utopia seems to appear everywhere in this in these works, and Wager was the one that was missing a link with Utopia. So I thank you very much for realizing what I have missed here. Thank you very much.
Regis?
Yeah?
I would have thought that Moore mentioned Thomas More. I mean, if I had seen that play, I would have expected to see like Othello, a black Moor, and then they never related it, the play to Thomas More. Really. Is the character meant to be an African at all, or it is? I don't think you said that, no? He's meant to be a fool of fortune, but there's no relation with Othello, an African, or anything like this, because, well, the word in Italian.
Yeah, the word in Italian, but in Old English, the word is the same for Moor, the African Moor and Sir Thomas More. They use the same spelling.
So there's no ambiguity in the play?
The ambiguity is preserved in both languages.
Okay.
Yeah, so in Italian or in English, the ambiguity is there.
I'm not too sure.
It's curious because they mean the same. The word means the same thing in the different languages, and
plus all the others that we have mentioned.
yeah.
He played on that. He himself, yes, but
Yeah.
played here.
I'm wondering whether a lot of these representations during the Elizabethan and Jacobean period couldn't be read as kind of an attempt to neutralize the More's reputation, because he's constantly being aligned with this figure of, well, on the one hand, of the fool, of the jester, even in anecdotes and so forth. Also in the book of Sir Thomas More, which you can mention, he dies, or
he dies making a joke.
It's also in Harpsfield, but the authors choose to take over this joke that he makes about his beard in order to make him appear as the jester, as the fool in a way in these last moments. And on the other hand, or what's highlighted is more the humanist, or the sort of the prudent citizen as an advocate of the poor, and I think that is something which accords very well with all the instances that you've shown here in Nash, Moore, the author of Utopia, who thinks about the ideal state, but on the other hand, he's also associated with Cornelius Agrippa, so he's kind of the magician and the dreamer, perhaps.
Yeah.
On the other hand, and he's also associated with fortune. So I think a lot of these representations, even though they memorize more, they very much try to
pick
stress
up
those aspects of Moore which make his reputation kind of palatable and neutral in a Protestant culture. Is that something you would agree with?
I agree with you. I think that they pick up elements of Moore's life that would be palpable or would fit the author's needs for example, Nash quotes always Moore being an Englishman, and so every time Nash mentions Moore, not in Traveller but in other works, Nash says that he was a humanist, he was a scholar, he was an Englishman, he was our countryman. So he tries to identify himself with Moore. But he picks up for example, Nash doesn't talk about the great matter. For him, Moore is a humanist, he's a literary author. And the problem is when they go beyond the Lord Chancellor thing. For example, in the play of Cromwell, Thomas More is the Lord Chancellor, Wolsey has died, More is the Chancellor, and Cromwell is beside him, and they call Cromwell Lord Chancellor, and More is beside him. And More should be wearing the state clothes of the Lord Chancellor. But they choose to ignore Moore's status at that time. They choose to be not precise about some facts about Moore's life. I think it's more like choosing the right material to pass censorship or to fit the necessity of the play or the literary work.
How does he end up in that play? Does he simply disappear from the stage after that scene?
Yeah. He just disappears. He's just a commentator. He just says some silly phrases, nothing very wit. So that's why I thought that he's very like Wolfgang Moore. It's the same formula. Cromwell is the one with wit. The two play the modern version and in the 1600 play. So they choose the element that they want freely. Very modern.
I think the ambivalent image of Thomas More in England comes through John Fox acts and Remembrances. The Protestants were a very bad image of Thomas More, and this was a problem, I think. It was very unilateral.
Yeah. Even in the actor in John Fox, he's not very sure about what he. I don't get Fox's idea of Moore as being very negative.
Yeah.
Even if Fox is writing a huge martyrology, he doesn't seem to have a anti-Moore position, and neither show these ones too.
Yeah, I was just struck by your comment that whenever Thomas Nash talks about Moore, he talks about him as an Englishman, and that some of these literary attempts to deal with Moore are perhaps, as you said, sort of slightly more neutral than a lot of what we've seen before, the polemical texts that deal with him. And I wonder if that's part of a sort of movement to establish Moore as one of England's leading literary figures. If you look at the mentions of Moore, somebody did a concordance, God bless them, a while ago, in sort of the 100 years after his death. Most of the time he comes up is in reference to his poems, or Utopia second to that. And some of the English rhetoricians of the time, like Wilson, talks about Moore as the master of irony, and I think, if I'm remembering my Wilson correctly, he identifies him and as our own Englishman Thomas More was able to do. And it seems that people like then Nash and Shakespeare would be very, very interested to establish Moore in this light, a very different light from those other Moors floating around, so that they could claim this English heritage as opposed to the continental heritage of rhetoricians and literary figures. This Thomas More would be quite distinct, and so I wonder if you could put some of this in that tradition, that line.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there is a appropriation, like when you choose from Moore what you want, you put in on your team.
Yes.
So a few years later than the last play that I worked here, in John Webster's Monuments of Honor, I think 1630s, something like that, Moore is listed with Sidney, Chaucer, and some other poets.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes, no, I was just following that up. In Acts and Monuments, Fox mentions specifically that Moore was a wit, an intellectual, and a great author, and he should have stayed, he was a layman, and he should have stayed in that job and not talk about things that he really didn't know anything about. Which meant that Fox, of course he was the great Protestant martyrologist, saw Moore as the leading intellectual. He was the English Renaissance in his own body in early Horatian society, and that was of value. On the other hand, of course, he was their Catholic polemicist, and that did not endure him to Fox. But you're right about that idea of selectivity. Moore was a man of many, many different views, and his work as a classicist in English was very important to the Englishman.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there was no successor to Moore before Shakespeare, and so we don't have anyone to put in that role. No great like Moore, no great Englishman between the two. Some may disagree, but I think the
We had Sidney.
yeah, we had Sidney, but
You have Spencer, and you have
but Moore's
was cultivated as an intellectual long before he was known as a poet. I mean, his whole education with Lanquet was designed to make him a scholar.
Yes, I was wondering about the Alice Haywood book that you said was published in Florence and written in Italian. Do you know, was it ever translated and or even in Italian available in England?
so the Il Moro was published in a very small format, so it would be very easy to pass
So it
through
was
the
probably
from the
happening.
continent to England.
Yeah.
And there is an entry of a possible translation of Il Moro, and it will be, the title would be something like the English Academy, but the work doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
So I haven't. So there is the possibility that Haywood was known in the very time of the Sir Thomas More, the play by Anthony Munday was written, and so very different views of Moore at the same time.
Yeah.
There's a possibility, but no, I'm not
As far
sure.
as I know, he was going back and forth between the countries. I mean, I can't remember now when he would have been. Yeah. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just
No?
interested if there was, if it was read at the time in
Yeah, we are not sure if Poole received his copy, because he meant he wrote a book for Reginald Poole when he tried to send the book to Poole, but Poole had problems to reach the book, so
Okay.
we never had sure if Poole received the book and what he thought about it, and so good.
You don't know that. Oh, that's
And there's a curious history of the book itself that I haven't gone too much further and
yeah.
to know who are the readers and how was the reception in Firenze, for example.
Yes, I have a question. In all the text you've examined, the various images of Sir Thomas More and the various periods, More is a sort of secondary figure. Not even we're not even certain that Moros is Thomas More, or he is a choric figure, you say, or he is totally isolated, or is just mentioned, briefly mentioned in Shakespeare and Fletcher's Henry VIII. And why do you leave aside the play working on Sir Thomas More? Can you tell us why?
I gave so many papers about Sir Thomas More. No, I'm just kidding. But I choose the non-apparent works about Thomas More, because in Sir Thomas More by Monday and the censor played
Never performed.
would never perform, but the problem was not Moore. This is the point. The problem of the play was censored and stopped because of the rebellion in the initial scenes. And the censor, as his markings showed us, he doesn't have any problem with a play about Moore.
Really?
Yeah. So there is no problem on depicting Moore, as I have tried to show that Moore appeared constantly in the 16th century, and all these plays are printed. The only one that was not printed and remained as manuscript, as far as I know, is the most famous one. So it's the non-printed one is the one that we know, and the printed works are the ones that we have. The Nash is very popular, but the Sir Thomas More space is 2 paragraphs, so it's very limited to the aspect of Moore he chose to depict.
Well,
I'd just like
yes.
to mention something about the book of Sir Thomas More,
Sure.
to which Shakespeare contributed, etc. There was a fascinating study that we published in Montreal a few years ago, done by Arthur Kinney, who had many manuscripts, and he saw that the play was an enduring one, and it was repeatedly performed or written, perhaps by hand, but changed all over the time to fit the contemporary regime. They needed a hero, a sort of social hero, that would appease the crowds. So they have transformed Thomas More into this social hero, this master of crowds. And sometimes they changed the name of the king or the etc. So it has continued over the years, but perhaps not printed.
We don't have records of performances and
Yes.
Just a quick question while we're on the topic. I think it's very interesting, the suggestion that it's not More, it's the problem with the play, it's the riots. And I think that the riots are often, or the riot, 1517, is often overlooked sort of in Thomas More's, when we think about Thomas More's life. And I think part of that reason for that is that it doesn't come up much in the 16th century depictions of him. It's not something that it relates to any of his works or so on and so forth. From any of these, do the riots come up in any of the depictions?
for many of these, I'm sorry.
So the 1517 May Day riot, right? Does it come up in any of the depictions that you looked at?
Also what we call evil May Day.
Yeah, the evil May Day
No.
riot. No, it doesn't come up. Yeah.
1517.
Doesn't appear.
Because it does, of course, it's the beginning of the book of Sir Thomas.
Yeah,
Which is rare, really.
It's depicted incorrectly. So it's depicted with the different ending.
Yes.
So they are very different ending from the historical
Yes,
episode.
yes, yes, yes.
So
Okay.
yeah, I think that's why I think it's Anthony Monday trying to create the rise of Sir Thomas More through rebellion control, but he somehow failed to do it, and the pages missing were replaced by edition 3 of the Sir Thomas More book, and so we don't know what Anthony Monday did that with the rebellion scene, that he didn't complete the scene, because we have the rebellion scene and we have the final of the rebellion scene, and we have the 3 pages of a tribute to Shakespeare. So we don't know if there were more problems in the rebellion scene that the ones that he tried to stroke, the censor stroke, that were not for staging. But the events of Moore's life are very well picked up. So they don't choose public events, and most of them are fictional. Sir Thomas More is the one who tried to be more historical, even in the Henry VIII, who is more the Henry VIII play by Fletcher in Shakespeare. They choose historical episodes, but the one that mentions Moore is the fall of Wolsey, and so and then the next scene is the coronation of Anne. So Moore should be, yeah. We don't know where is Moore between the acts. So we should see him more, but the play goes on, and so there is the problem of depicting Moore, certainly, but depicting Moore had their own way, indirect ways, allegorical ways, literary ways of recalling utopia and creating utopia atmosphere in the reader's mind. There were strategies to depict Moore.
Okay, I think we're coming to a close, and we have to thank our 2 speakers once again for their contributions. Thank you.